All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at our speaker program tonight. My name is Leslie Brill. I'm president of the Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon Society, and we are honored to have with us tonight the great Julie Zickefoose, who's one of our favorite nature authors and illustrators of all time around here. And before I turn things over to Julie, I'm just going to read her bio. Um, Julie Zickefoose lives and works quietly on an 80-acre wildlife sanctuary in the back country of Whipple, Ohio. She is a prolific writer and painter who was an All Things Considered commentator for 5 years. Her illustrated work, The Bluebird Effect, was an Oprah's Book Club pick in 2012. After 37 years of contributing art and writing to Birdwatchers Digest, Julie recently became advising editor to the new and improved BWD magazine. Her heavily illustrated books include Natural Gardening for Birds, Letters from Eden, The Bluebird Effect, and Baby Birds, An Artist Looks into the Nest, the subject of tonight's talk. Her newest book is Saving Jemima, Life and Love with a Hard Luck Jay, the intimate story of how an orphaned bird can save a soul. So before I turn it over, I just want to say I have had this book on my kitchen table for a while that I'm reading like a bird a day and with gorgeous illustrations by our speaker and also have subscribed to Birdwatchers Digest magazine, which I highly recommend, and you can see her beautiful work in there as well. Let me admit the rest of the people here. All right. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Julie Zickefoose.
Leslie, did you want to mention the program for April while we're at it?
I wasn't planning to, but I can. That is that is going to be our first Zoom program. I mean, our first in-person program since COVID. And that's April 16th at 7 p.m. in person at the Eastchester Library. We will have a naturalist, Tom Tyning, doing a program on Florida's Everglades. And that should be a wonderful program. So please keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
I'm just going to try to make something disappear here. Okay, there we go. All right. Is it turned over to me?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Leslie.
Sure.
Really, really pleased to be here tonight. And I'll be talking about Baby Birds, which is a book I think of as sort of my life's work. Not too long ago, this is what my house looked like. We've been having an incredibly snowy winter, but today it was 65 degrees and I gardened absolutely all day. And one of my specialties is overdoing it. So I had to do an Epsom salt soak before I could talk to you. And this is what it looks like in June. I live on an 80-acre private sanctuary in Southeast Ohio, and that is a bird watching tower. Let's see. Why is this not advancing? That's interesting. Okay. I have planted for birds and butterflies, and it's really quite an amazing variety of things that have sprung up from the intensive wildlife planting I've been doing since 1993. This is the view from the top of the birdwatching tower, and you can imagine how spectacular it can be on a May morning with the birds coming through, the migrants. And it's also pretty spectacular in October as well. But here you can see a little glimpse of, the land that I care for and the prairie plantings that I have, some of them. And it's quite a thrill to be 42 feet up in the air with the vultures. So I think of myself as a sort of unpaid, rather dirty superhero, and my superpower is saving economically worthless wildlife that without me would die. In this picture, I'm taking a painted turtle off the road, and that truck that is just cresting the hill with the giant oversized tires actually revved and sped up and tried to hit the turtle before I could get it. Did not succeed. my favorite part of this picture, besides the truck cresting the hill, is the Greek chorus of juvenile starlings on the guardrail there watching. Go, Julie, go, get the turtle. So I am the person that people call when a goose gets wound up in monofilament and somebody needs to wade into the Ohio River on the levee in February to get it. But I try to keep a low profile now because being a wildlife rehabber can be a real burnout proposition. So I'm definitely toning down my act, although I do have to go pick up a kestrel tomorrow for release. So I think of my job as looking out the window and sharing what I see. And it's a pretty good window because I've got tons and tons of birds, and there is never a shortage of inspiration. These are some of the plates for the bluebird effect, the watercolors before I sent them off to be scanned. So you can see sort of the volume of of watercolors and work that I do. And that flat file, that oaken flat file there is absolutely stuffed with bird paintings. I'm not sure why this is doing this, but all right. So baby birds was actually a dream that snuck up on me. I didn't know I was working on a book. I just knew that I was fascinated by baby birds and I wanted to paint them from life because I could, and I had access to baby birds. And it turned out that there was nobody else doing that, painting birds from the moment they hatched until they fledged. And nobody else had actually ever done it. Now, George Sutton had painted the odd portrait of a nestling here and there, as did Louis Fuertes, but nobody had done it in a systematic way to show the developmental arc. So I just want to go back a little bit and talk about some of the books that have shaped me and that really sort of set the hook for me to become an illustrator. And this 50-cent Golden Guide was one of them. In that book, there was a tone painting that absolutely took my imagination to wonderful places, even though it's quite a violent scene of a buffalo jump. I'll show you how it's supposed to look. There's William R. Lee's painting of the Buffalo Drive. I love the drama. I love the colors. I love the treatment of the figures and the light and shadow. And I just wanted to do this. When I was a little kid, I saw that and I thought, I just want to paint. I just want to do this. So I was very, very lucky in the parent lottery. I had a father who could fix anything. He was often dirty. As you can see, he's got grease all on the front of his shirt because he worked with old machinery. He liked to restore turn of the century gasoline engines. This is the only picture I have of him and me together. I'm about 13, and I'm trying desperately to be the boy that he wished I had been. Tough. I was a girl. But he brought me this sheaf of Audubon prints, and we're looking at them there on a Saturday morning, and it's just the kind of stuff we did. I was lucky. I had great parents. So if you'll notice, we're looking at a tern print there. And there was a full circle moment a few years ago when a friend of mine asked me to restore an Audubon elephant folio print of the Arctic tern. And so what he gave me is on the left there, and what I did with my watercolors is on the right. There was nothing quite like painting over Havel's engraving and Audubon's drawing. It was such a thrill, and he liked it so much, he asked me to do the common tern as well. So bringing those back to life was just a tremendous thrill. And I have to say, the paper was a joy to work on, very absorbent, 100% rag, amazing stuff. So when I was a kid, the kinds of stuff that my dad read to me were this Ernest Thompson Seton, Wild Animals I Have Known, was probably the formative book for me because it treated animals as individuals who were sentient, who had goals and hopes and dreams. And more importantly, Seton illustrated it himself. So from a very early age, my dad kind of impressed on me that it was really cool to illustrate your own work. And he was working on all us kids to make us into creative people, and it worked pretty well. The other book that he loved to read to me was by Conrad Lorenz, Man Meets Dog. And this is still just a classic work about canine thought and brain power. And, Lorenz was an animal behaviorist from Austria who did not just observe animal behavior, he participated in it. And he allowed a brood of gray lag geese to grow up and imprint on him and follow him all around his little town. But look at the marginal drawings in his book. Look at the little caricatures of what we've done to the dog. It's just to the wolf, actually, making our dog breeds. So I found a kindred spirit there. I was extremely in love with the work of Holling and Lucille Holling. They did a bunch of books about uncharismatic microfauna like hermit crabs and snapping turtles. And I was enchanted by these books. And Lucille did the tempera paintings, and Holling wrote the text, but of course he got all the billing, as is often the case back in the 50s. So if you can get your hands on these used books, they are well worth it to try and order up. They're incredible books. There was a kind of a funny coincidence, just karma, all kinds of things coming together when I met Lois Darling, who was one of the illustrators for Silent Spring, Rachel Carson's famous book. And her husband, Louis Darling, illustrated Beverly Cleary's books about Henry Huggins, Ribsy, The Mouse and the Motorcycle, Ramona the Pest, Beezus and Ramona. And I don't think there's ever been anybody better at capturing gesture and expression in drawings. And so from about the time I was in third grade, I was enchanted by their art. And so when I finally met Lois at a Nature Conservancy fundraiser in Connecticut in about 1982, we bonded instantly. And Lois made me her executrix, and she left me the little boat that you can see she's in there in the top center. She also left me a chunk of land in Maine, and she really gave me a lot of inspiration, and she kind of taught me how to act like an artist, be an illustrator. She always said to me, if you're meeting clients, look the part and don't dress to the nines, look like an artist. So it was pretty cool. So Edith Holden was another very, very influential artist for me. I remember where I was standing in a used bookstore on Martha's Vineyard on a rainy October day when I first saw The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady, which was a very popular book. And it was like seeing my own work in this book. I couldn't believe that there was somebody else who was going out and gathering used nests and flowers and doing these studies in watercolor, which was exactly what I was doing at the time. And except that she'd been 100 years earlier, So it was really, really amazing. And it made this kind of art even more accessible to me. I thought, well, I could paint like that. And so I tried to. But Louis Fuertes was probably my greatest mentor who I never met, probably the greatest bird painter who's ever drawn breath. And from upstate New York, from Ithaca, he was just an incredible person. And just to tell you how incredible, he was the artist on an expedition going to Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia. And he was charged with painting and drawing the specimens as they collected them. And he did these incredible paintings that you're seeing before you. But on the way over in the big ship, the ship rolled, and his big trunk full of art equipment went overboard. So he had none of the tools that he had brought with him to do these paintings. So he went into a little gift shop in Addis Ababa when they landed, and he bought some tone paper meant for pastel, and he bought a child's watercolor set with dry pans and some little brushes, and he did these works with them. So it's not what you're using, it's what you do with them. Another mentor was Bob Clem. You may remember the one illustrated book that most people have seen that he did was The Shorebirds of North America with text by Peter Matheson. It came out in the 70s or maybe the 80s. And he was just an incredible painter and an incredible mentor who sent me good watercolor paper to work on. He looked at my work, he critiqued it very harshly, which I needed. And he told me what I should be doing. And he said, you should be drawing from life. And if you've got only house sparrows in your yard, you should just be drawing house sparrows. Draw whatever's in front of you. Well, I was lucky enough to live in a place with wild turkeys. So I did a lot of wild turkey drawings, and I took to taking a sketchbook over my shoulder wherever I went, and I sketched instead of photographed. And when you've been sketching for a while and you're in the zone, you can get a very reductionist style and art that evokes the turkey without more lines than you need, and I love that. I spent an entire summer under an osprey nest and just sketched them in every possible pose and attitude, and that was an incredible summer. Just, I'm so grateful that I took the time and wasn't worried about making a living, uh, and that I had kind people who would let me house sit for them so that I could do this kind of thing, because this Connecticut was really my incubator for art. So the other thing Bob Clem told me was to get a hold of all the dead birds I could, because that was how I could learn. So I got a salvage permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I began making study skins of these birds. But before I did that, I would paint them life size. And I learned so much about, say, how a pied-billed grebe's legs work. They only go out to the side like a boat's oars. So the bird actually cannot walk on land. It can only drag itself along. So I entered the sort of phase of my career where I was doing field guide illustrations, because that's the only work that is available to bird painters generally starting out. And so I did a ton of those. But I always longed to do scenes with more information and a story. And my favorite thing to do is to reconstruct, extinct birds and bring them back to life. So the ivory-billed woodpecker is an example of a painting like that. That was a Birdwatcher's Digest cover way back in the 80s, 90s. And I did lots of work, illustration work for all kinds of different places. The Department of Defense had me do a bunch of paintings for a booklet they did. And probably my biggest job was for the Birds of North America, which is now called Birds of the World. And it was a project of Cornell University and the Academy of Natural Sciences and the American Ornithologists Union. And it was a 10-year project that went a little longer. And I was a primary illustrator, and they had me do drawings of things that they couldn't get photos of, which was kind of awesome. So that was a really great workout. So those three other drawings that don't have a tank in them were for the Birds of North America. In the course of my association with Birdwatcher's Digest, you can see the first cover I ever painted in the upper left-hand corner, a little ruby-crowned kinglet in 1986. And this is an array of the covers I've done since. And it was an incredibly fruitful association. I actually married the editor. I had been doing covers for BWD for quite a while before I even met him. And then when I met him, sparks flew and we became a pair, and I did even more covers after that. But I've also done, odd illustration. This is for Alan Poole, probably the world's renowned osprey expert, one of the few who knows the most about ospreys. He lives in coastal Massachusetts, and I wanted to show how ospreys could cross vast distances of water, so I put an ocean liner there. And I guess one of my favorite things to illustrate are the covers of breeding bird atlases, and I've been honored to do two for Pennsylvania. I did Ohio's recently, and I just did West Virginia's not too long ago. So it's a great honor to be asked to illustrate a breeding bird atlas cover. It's really fun to do. So I also every year do a commission for the Wilson Ornithological Society. They have an award that they give to a person of lifetime achievement, and I was very excited to have the Puerto Rican toady be the bird they picked a few years ago. And I just finished another one of those paintings. So private commissions and things like that, and illustrations. These are imperial woodpeckers again. You know, it's such fun to like have to find out what pines the imperial woodpecker nested in Mexico and Cuba, and then to create the Sierra Madre Mountains backdrop. And the only thing I can say is for the time that I'm doing a painting which has a scene like this, I feel that I'm actually living in it. I get to breathe the mountain air and hear the birds' calls and smell the pines. So it's just, I really love painting, and I find I sleep better when I'm painting. So that's this was one of my favorite commissions for an ornithologist who wanted a bunch of very specific things in the painting. These are the Flint Hills of Kansas, and they have stone fence posts that are made from the flint outcrops that you can see in the background. And he wanted certain species of plants, and he wanted an outcrop, and he wanted the fence posts, and he wanted a Say's Phoebe there. So I kind of put it all together and just had an absolute blast with it. So I really, at heart, am an illustrator. I love to tell stories with my paintings. I had an epiphany in 1993 when a book I had illustrated won a John Burroughs medal. And the epiphany was because I had been given the manuscript to read so I could see what the illustrations I would do would be. And I noticed that the manuscript was rife with errors. It was absolutely a mess, and there were all kinds of inaccuracies. So I asked if I might do some rewriting and some crossing out. And by the time I was done with the manuscript, it had been basically professionally, scientifically edited at no cost to the publisher. So when the book came out and it won a Burroughs medal, guess who gets the medal? The author, not the illustrator. So I had a forehead slap moment, and I thought I should be writing these books, not illustrating them. And that was what set me off on a journey. Um, I have always had bluebird boxes. I've always managed around 25 bluebird boxes in the area where I live in Ohio. And I've always taken my kids along. And it was a natural thing to start with bluebirds because this was a bird that I knew the best. When I was seeing things like this on a daily basis, and I knew that people didn't get to see hatching bluebirds, I knew that this was something that I needed to share. So I started with bluebirds, and from the moment I painted a little roly-poly, newly hatched nestling from life, I was absolutely hooked. It was kind of crazy, actually, because it was so compelling to me. And I painted and painted, and then came the time when these birds were too old to handle anymore. I would take them out of their nest, keep them warm and happy, fed, and I would quickly do a 20-minute pencil study and a painting. And then I would take them back out to the box and replace them. And then the next day I'd come and get the same bird and do it again. So that was the process. But by the time they get to day 12, you can see that eye, that bright eye. And then when they look at you and you see fear in their eye, you must stop handling them. You have to just let them, fledge naturally. You don't want to cause them to jump out of the box from fear. So what happened was I wanted to continue the series. So I actually raised some bluebirds that were orphaned. And this gives you an idea of how they develop the skills to pick up their own food. You can see the other two are begging from the one that had the wherewithal to grab the mealworm. So there's another one there. We gape at it. The sheer outrage on that one face.
Oh, you little stinkers. Okay, let's get you some more meat.
So those are 34-day-old bluebirds, and they're only just getting the idea of how to get their own food. Now, here they are after release,
Most excellent.
and they're coming in to my call to eat.
I got all three of them. Oh, so good to see my girls. I miss them when they're not around. But look here, here's the bowl. There's the whole bowl. There you go. Yeah.
So I set up these little feeding stations around the yard,
Most pretty.
and they can come in and get food and also learn to forage slowly on their own. Now, these bluebirds are the same bluebirds, but they are about 56 days old.
They're so fat.
So I'm going to mute that because I just babble here, but you can see how they're beautiful. Russet breast feathers are coming in, and I had the honor of painting these birds as they grew, as they developed. And I actually wound up feeding them like this in my yard through about day 60. And it was probably much longer than they needed to be fed, but they were successful. And the last time I saw the birds, they were with a flock of 10 others, and it was December. And so I knew that this soft release technique of mine of coddling them and letting them slowly learn how to become bluebirds and forage was successful. And I have done this with probably 17 different species of songbirds. So I have pretty much honed my act as far as soft release and concentrating on giving them the skills and supporting them with food while they learn how to be adults without the benefit of having their own parents there. So it was an amazing experience, and every single bird that I raise that I act as mom to teaches me myriad things, as you'll see as we go. So um so these are some of the paintings that came out of those sessions where I was able to just really track their plumage development day by day. Here we are. You can see day 66. I've still got them around and feeding them, and they're looking like bluebirds, all right. Here's my daughter. I love this picture because those are her August cross country uniforms hanging to dry on the line, and she's being beset by bluebirds as she's trying to hang out the clothes. So how do I safely get my hands on baby birds to paint them? Well, my first concern is not to do any harm, not to attract any predators to the nest. So I started with cavity nesters, only birds that were in my baffled boxes. I saw both of the tree swallows sitting on top of this box, and I thought, whoa, great photo op. And as I walked up with my camera focused on the birds, I didn't even notice the black rat snake that was climbing the post right near the box. But you can see that rat snake was trying to figure out how to get over to the box, which of course it couldn't. But I don't put up any boxes unless they are protected by baffles. And I'm very strict about that. This is what a black rat snake will do to a bird's nest. This poor robin knows that bad stuff is coming. Oh, hello. Let me just take care of your eggs here. Checks a couple times to make sure you got them all. So there is a host of predators just waiting to rob nests, and I'm very sensitive to that. So I don't want to attract any attention to these nests. So that's why I was working with only the birds in my boxes that I could protect absolutely. This is just a little array. A lot of people don't know what voracious predators chipmunks are, but they will eat nestlings and eggs, and they will also eat adult birds. I've seen it. They jump them as they're sunbathing under my feeders sometimes. So there's the setup with the baffles and just keeping them safe. So I was very excited to find a nest in one of my boxes that I didn't recognize. I know what a Carolina wren nest looks like, but they have skeletonized leaves in their nest. This was a nest that had a bunch of crunchy, dry leaves in it, and I was so excited. And I wasn't sure, so the next time I went and opened the box, I had my camera ready.
I missed it. I'll leave it be. How cool is that?
That is the snake strike display of a tufted titmouse. You do not want to be on the other end of that. If you reach into a box and it bites you, it's either a chickadee or a titmouse. They are very feisty birds. But what an opportunity. The only tufted titmouse I've had nest in my boxes in 34 years. So of course I painted them. And this is my process. I hold the baby in my warm left hand and I draw with my right. And that way the baby stays warm. I have it under a heat lamp as I'm working, and I feed it age appropriate food. And then I immediately, when I'm done, I take it back out to the nest and put it right back in the nest. So the baby that I choose, I know which one it is because baby birds keep the same place in the nest throughout their infancy. So if he's at 4 o'clock in the nest, I know he's going to be at that same position in the nest the next day. And the babies I work with actually are bigger and fatter than the others. So it's real easy to tell them from the others because they get maybe another 4 feedings per day. And they actually grow to like it. So that's kind of cool. And that is the fine little bunch of titmice there. Just a great brood. Now this is day 19. I've long since stopped painting them, but I came back to check on them.
Wow.
Yeah, I did not want them to explode on me.
Didn't think they'd still be here. Hallelujah.
You can hear an indigo bunting and an ovenbird singing in the background, and it just makes you realize how impoverished we are in winter when you see a little clip from spring like this and you hear all the voices. I cannot wait till the birds come back and start singing. So I worked my way through all of the species that I could get in my nest boxes. And then I started to try to think about how to work with open cup nesters like cardinals and sparrows and indigo buntings. And that's a lot more difficult. Open cup nests are a lot more vulnerable to predators than cavity nests. So the young of open cup nest birds develop a bunch faster. They get out of the nest as fast as they can, like the northern cardinal fledges at day 9, whereas the pileated woodpecker fledges at day 26. So huge differential in the developmental arc, and I was dying to paint that. So I had the perfect opportunity when the indigo buntings that were nesting and bathing in my bird bath, they were bathing in my bird bath and they were nesting in a hedge right along a cement sidewalk along my garage. So I was able to stand on the cement sidewalk, point my camera down through the hibiscus leaves, take a photo, and walk on without alerting any area predators. Actually, twice I removed black rat snakes that had gotten wind of the nest and actually saved this nest by virtue of having such a close eye on it. But look at how fast these things grow. You can just kind of follow down day 6, 7, 8, and 9, and by day 10, they are feathered. They don't look ready for prime time, but they go and they fledge when they are ridiculously small. But then the female feeds them through at least day 26 when they're looking as big as she is. So the idea is they just need to get out of that nest as fast as they can because it's so hazardous. So when I found cardinals building a nest in my little Japanese maple in the front yard, the first thing I did was baffle the tree. And it was small enough that I could do that with a yard funnel. And the first night I had that baffle on, there were muddy coon prints on it as they tried to get up into the tree to get the nest. It was amazing. But I did a similar technique with the cardinals where I took a photo a day. I climbed on a ladder. I pointed the camera down into the nest and took a photo and crept away and never touched anything, never removed the baby. And that was the way to go. Cardinals are very strange looking young because they have enormous eyes. They look like toads. And the idea is that cardinals are actually crepuscular birds. They are most active at dawn and dusk. So they have enormous light gathering eyes. When a cardinal reaches day 9, it's ready to fledge. It looks back at you like a little brown toad, and it will stay hidden in the shrubbery, peeping incessantly through day 56. The parents feed them that long. And anybody who has had baby cardinals at the feeder in the summer knows this because you hear them going beep, 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 all summer long. But they feed them even as they're going into their first adult plumage. It's pretty cool. So a lot of people think mourning doves are just kind of dimwits, they don't really give them a lot of credit. I've actually raised 4 of them, and they're among my favorite birds to raise because they are so personable. They are very tactile and very cuddly. But their developmental arc is so cool. They start out looking like these little yellow teddy bears. They have this weird stringy yellow down. But so quickly, they begin sprouting pin feathers. Look at day 5. The thing is already feathering out at 5 days of age. Day 6, it looks like a porcupine. By day 8, the feathers are bursting the sheaths and it's feathered. And by day 11 or 12, they are out of the nest and actually able to fly short distances. They are then fed by their parents through about day 20 when they naturally start picking up, little seeds off the ground. But a couple of the birds I have raised, I have rescued. I've found them starving, trying to eat gravel because they just didn't know what to do and their parents had lost track of them, probably off breeding again. So they have a vulnerability there. But how do they grow so fast? Well, the parents feed them rocket sauce. The adult dove's crop, which is a food storage sac in the front of the chest, the volume of it increases by 20 times through egg laying and hatching. The hormone prolactin causes them to create this milk-like substance in their crop, and the epithelial lining sloughs off, and they feed it to the young, and it's 57% protein and 34% fat by dry weight. So they really literally feed their babies rocket sauce, which is how they grow so fast. One of the birds that I was the most eager to paint was a cuckoo. This is a yellow-billed cuckoo nest that we found on our property way back when. I think it was, maybe in the late 90s. I was working with a little Olympus point and shoot at that point. And I actually was astonished to see these things looking like dinosaurs standing on the shards of their enormous blue eggs. And I set my camera to video and watch what happens when I hit the rim of the nest by mistake. I can't see what I'm doing. I've got the camera up over my head. Those birds just hatched, and they are flapping their wings and yelling, probably to try to frighten me, make me think they're rattlesnakes. I'm not sure, but it's an incredible display. And so I was very excited to paint them because the more I delved into the literature, the more I learned. By day 2, a baby cuckoo is sprouting its wing feathers, and it can already sit on the rim of the nest, perch, and snap at passing flies. Day 2. And it just gets more amazing from there. They feather out by day 6, and by day 7, they leave the nest fully feathered, tiny miniatures of their parents. And once again, they are trying to get out of the nest as quickly as possible so they can then skulk through the shrubbery and be fed by their parents through about day 21. So it's a different technique than these cavity nesters have. And the way they do it is they have yellow-billed cuckoo has the largest egg relative to its body size of any bird in North America. In that egg is a huge yolk. It's a very well-provisioned egg. And from that very, very nutritious, huge yolk hatches a baby that develops incredibly fast. It's just an amazing system. So this is an old shot of me painting. I have a tree swallow painting in progress. You can see I'm working on a 20 by 30 inch hot press sheet of watercolor paper. I've got the baby on what I called a diaper, just a Kleenex, so it wouldn't poop on the actual painting. But having it right there on the paper, you can see I have a little calipers there, helps me to judge the actual size of the bird and get my proportions exactly right. This is the starling plate. You can see how big the paper is. I actually often had trouble reaching all the corners of the paper. Starlings were really, really fun to paint because they're so weird. They're like these big inflatable bags of goo with giant clown lips. They're really cool. And, I say to no birds, well, it really helps to have been their mama. And I definitely was their mama. When I raised these Phoebes were probably the most difficult birds I have ever raised. They have very high calcium requirement, and they have a high moisture requirement because they're fed on flying insects. So you got to keep them really well hydrated or they get anorexic. They won't eat. And I was always worried about these 2 Phoebes. And here I was following Luther after I released him, trying to get him to take just one more worm. I was so worried that all my work would go to naught. But they made it into the book. The Phoebes did. That was a really good bird to be able to do. But I had just sent in the manuscript and the book was in press and the phone rang and I got my holy grail birds, brown thrashers. Oh, I had always wanted to raise them. They were my mother's favorite bird, my grandmother's favorite bird, my dad's favorite bird, and one of my favorite birds. So they came in May 29. And I named them, I gave them good Southern names, Melba, Harper, and Cletus, just guessing at the sexes. And I started this thing on Instagram called Your Daily Thrasher, which was very, very popular. Watching these things grow up, they were incredibly smart, wonderful birds. There they are at day 24. It was such an honor to be their mom. Thrashers are very standoffish. They are not cuddly in the least. They hide a lot. They don't want to be touched, but they're very mischievous. They like to pull each other's tails and then run away. So on release day, I took the tent that had been in the garage to keep the winds from blowing it away, and I moved the tent out onto the lawn. We walked it out there, and then when they were ready, I just opened the sides. And this is the difference between a day 10 thrasher and a day 50 thrasher. Melba, of the 3, was one of the females. She took off soon after I released them. And she actually joined the family of the male brown thrasher that had been singing in the yard. And he, I believe, finished raising her. And she came back on day 50 looking like $1 million. That was just a wonderful transformation. So this was 2023. I had a fresh batch of Carolina wrens arrive. I just love Carolina wrens, and they are the smartest, cutest little things. Oh my gosh. Look how cool they are. They just swallow these giant worms. I have put paint on their foreheads so I can tell who's who. It's acrylic paint. I, of course, was in love with them instantly.
Bueller?
I had always wanted to raise Carolina wrens, but I'd never had the chance. So this was quite an opportunity. Now my dog is his name is Curtis Lowe. He's a mountain cur. He was tied to a box in Gallipoli, Ohio for the first 4 years of his life, unneutered, chained. He got into fights with neighborhood dogs, and he came to me wanting to kill everything he saw, but he underwent quite the transformation with a little training.
Babies. Come here, see the babies. Come on, Bert.
He's on the other side of the
Come
tent.
see the babies. Smelling the babies.
He wouldn't harm a feather on their heads. He just
Well, only one of you had the sense to fly. That's not good news.
those birds knew he wouldn't hurt them, and they would hop all over his head and back as he lay on the front porch. You can teach a dog anything. You really can. So Carolina wrens are a very special case. They're super intelligent. They have one of the largest brains per body size of any bird, and they are very, very affectionate. So even though these birds were raised together with other wrens, they just wanted to be with their mom. And so after I would feed them, they would all fly and want to sit in my hand at the same time. This is just not a posed picture. I just hold out my hand and here they would come. Kind of pile on top of each other. When their bellies were full, they wanted to take a nap. So here's how it would go. I would sit in a lawn chair in the
As soon as the feeding is done, this is what happens. They want, and given a choice, they would sleep on me for the next hour until the next feeding. But I have things to do. So I set an alarm on my phone and it goes off only an hour. And I come out and they're good and hungry. And I feed them. And then I cuddle them a little bit so they know they're loved. Yep, you are loved. Ooh, I needed a minute. Then I go back inside and work for an hour and see what I can get done before the 5-minute interlude. I was on an hour. Every hour for 13 hours a day.
Every hour for 13 hours a day. Now you're getting the feeling of what it's like to raise baby birds. You do nothing else when you've got them. But the rewards are so tremendous because seeing them grow up, seeing them gain their skills, and picking up their own food is just the best. So here we are at day 23. They're still being fed 13 times a day. And here is the day that Orange first grabbed and subdued a mealworm. I love this little cameo. I'm willing this bird to swallow it. Swallow it. Yes.
Good job, Orange. I'm so proud of you. What a good baby. What a good boy you are.
So I can taste freedom at this point. When they start picking up their own food and they're able to subdue a worm and swallow it, I get to go to the grocery store and mow the lawn and take a shower and all that good stuff. So this is release day. I had their tent in the garage because I could close it up at night, and I knew that no predators could break into it. And it would also not blow away in the high winds.
In and out, in and out, just busy, busy, busy.
So one fine day, I just unzipped the tent.
Oh, too scared. Go back. Go back.
And they're 31 days old. And the barometer for when to open the tent is when they are picking up all their own food, when I'm not giving them any syringe feedings or hand feedings whatsoever. So the first day of freedom, they came back into the tent to sleep in this little fleecy pocket that they always slept in.
About 5 on, I guess. And at 8, they came back into the tent, just as I prayed they would. I zipped it up, and they will sleep safely.
So this went on, and they slowly widened their circle. They stuck close to the garage. And the kind of cool thing that they did was they kind of had a word for me. Like they gave this juvenile call.
Where are you? Where'd you go?
Whenever I spoke to them, they'd give this little juvenile call.
You under there? Hi, Pinky.
They did not give it when I was not around. And they actually gave it for much longer than a wild bird would continue to give the fledgling call. It was really interesting. So if I saw a wren out in the yard and I asked who it was, I'd get back. They'd say that, and I'd know it was one of mine. So here we are, the third evening after release, and they're still coming back into the tent to sleep.
What would you say if I told you these guys willingly flew back into their tent on the street of freedom? Spending the night.
It's pretty cool. So at this point, I'm trying to give them a lot of food so that they can, learn how to be wrens, but not starve. So the problem is I have a lot of tufted titmice in my yard, and they're extremely intelligent birds, very, very crafty. So I had to come up with a way to offer mealworms and nice food to my wrens without the titmice cleaning it out immediately upon setting it out. So I invented what I called the wrenarium. I'm so proud of this. Basically, what I did was I cut the corner of the screen in my studio, and I set up this acrylic box that they could see into, and the wrens would come in the tiny hole in the screen and eat out of the box. It worked like a charm. I love how that one takes one for the road.
It's pink and blue. Pink being the last to leave. This feeder's working very well.
Yeah, I'm super, super proud of that. But then the titmice figured that out too. And I had to cover it in tracing paper so that light would come in, but the titmice couldn't see the food. And that foiled the titmice. The wrens had object permanence, so they knew that there were worms in there even if they couldn't see them. Now, the titmice would too, I'm sure, but they were a little leery about entering something where they didn't have a reward that they could see. So this was how I fed them in this nice little box and kept the titmice from cleaning me out. So here they are. They've been released June 18, and this is day 49, July 6th, and I have a nightly ritual.
And number 3.
Where I just sit in the tent and wait for them to come in.
Here's the roost call.
Giving the little roost call.
Roosty call. And then go to bed.
So pretty remarkable, that for 18 days, these birds kept coming back to the same tent. I'd zip the tent closed, I'd close the garage, and I would sleep so much better knowing that they were tucked in. I love this video, even though, the wrens, I don't know, they kind of make my hair look gray.
Oh my God, they're going to try and roost on me.
this was weird behavior. They did not go to the tent this night.
Since I've had a head full of wrens. Please go up to the roosting thing I made for you. It's late. Yes, a very good place to sleep tonight. I'll just stand here. How's that?
They actually wound up roosting in a Camasiparus not far from there. But it was
Try
just
to get them to go up to their roost.
kind of amazing to have them come, and it was almost like they were saying, okay, we're done with the tent. We're not sure where we're going to go, but we want you involved. So, they from then on, they were sleeping outdoors. I'm not sure where they slept, in tangles somewhere, but they used that code call with me every time we would encounter each other in the yard. It was really, really neat. So 2nd of September, here comes one, but it's looking in the studio window, giving the fledgling call, which was just great. It was like having him come up and say, Mom. So this is the kind of thing that I did, the kind of experiences that I had to live in order to be able to write this book, treating 17 species of birds, and tracing their development and also their mental development as well. So from the introduction of the book, I wrote, 13 years later, I've almost exhausted the possibilities of birds I can study without endangering them, painting every cavity nesting bird that could inhabit my nest boxes, save white-breasted nuthatch. Oh, how I'd love to have a white-breasted nuthatch to paint. But every species I've been able to depict seems like an extravagant gift. I dream of a second volume depicting whatever birds fate sends my way. Top of the list, white-breasted nuthatch. So Baby Birds was published in April 2016. And I debuted it at a festival where in West Virginia that I gave a keynote for 23 years, the New River Birding and Nature Festival in Fayetteville. And I came back from the festival with my car absolutely packed. And I had to use the bathroom because I'd been on the road for 4 hours, but something made me run down to a little bird box that is mounted on the clothesline pole in my side yard. I don't know what it was. I'll call it a little voice. And in that box was a nest. I checked it, and there was a fluffy little nest in there. And this was the day that I opened it, and the egg had hatched. My freaking God. It hatched. Baby nuthatches. And somehow my little voice knew that they were in that box. It was the first thing I did when I got home was check that box. I had no reason to think there were birds in there. The mother was a very skittish bird. She did not enjoy my coming in to snatch a baby, so I had to wait till she was off the nest to grab a baby to paint. And the first thing I did, as soon as I discovered the eggs, was baffle the box, even though it was a little difficult. I made a very tall baffle, took it off my peach tree and put it on the box. And this is a baby white-breasted nuthatch. This is the holy grail right here. Look how square he is. And this is the first few paintings of the whole nest and the little babies. Oh my gosh. And this is me feeding it. Look at it go down his throat. Oh, he's gonna poop. Keep shooting, keep shooting. Oh my, I know. It's pretty amazing, huh? You feel so much better now. Thanks, Liam. My son made that. He was 18 at the time. He made that video for me, and it was I just love having a videographer. It doesn't happen very often, but this is the kind of crazy stuff that goes on in my studio. So I paint these birds, and I'm filling up the whole sheet with writing and journal notes and all this stuff, and I almost ran out of paper. At the point at which the babies were looking back at me and beginning to be feathered, I had to stop painting because I was afraid I'd frighten them out of the nest. You can see how I had to cram the feathered babies over on the right there. I didn't expect them to stay in the nest for 23 days, but they did. And the last painting I did from life was the one of the baby in my hand. And then after that, my technique was to very quickly open the box, silently take a photo, close the box, and then work from the photo because I did not want to endanger those babies. So that was the technique. And the female always sat in front with her gray cap, and the male always sat in back with his black cap. So on July 8th, 2016, a 50-day-old male white-breasted nuthatch, freshly fledged, came and clung to a tomato stake outside my studio window and looked in at the desk where he had been painted time and time again. And that was such a benediction to have that bird return and look in at me. And I brought to mind this Joseph Conrad quote: "We must be willing to give up the life we had planned in order to have the life that is waiting for us." Bird rehab, painting baby birds from life, they all demand that you drop absolutely everything and just do that. And I was more than happy to do that. I love this quote from Andre Gide: "Do not do what someone else could do as well as you. Do not write what someone else could write as well as you. Care for nothing in yourself but what you feel exists nowhere else. And out of yourself, create, impatiently or patiently, the most irreplaceable of beings." So I would encourage everyone to think about what it is you're really good at, what you want to bring to the world, and concentrate on that. So thank you so much for tonight. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Oh my gosh. I don't know where to begin. I'm just fascinated. Thank you so much, Julie.
You're welcome.
Wow, from the early influences, which are so important for the rest of our lives, to the relationship with these birds, the diversity, their personality, the day-by-day development. I'm just blown away.
Cool. I'm glad you liked it. That's great. It's not stuff you can get anywhere else.
No, that last that last picture of the nuthatches and the whole story about the nuthatch, that's phenomenal.
Cool.
Um, I'm I'm sure a few people have questions. Um, I'll open the floor to questions and comments.
I'm mostly thrilled that I came in under an hour.
Yeah, so there's so much material there.
Lots of material. Yeah, and this is the cut version of the talk. I do these talks and it takes me like 6 months to do them, to put them together. And then I have to slash them because everybody wants a 50-minute talk.
At what point did you become a bird rehabber or wildlife rehabber?
When I was about 8.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I lived next door to a house in Richmond, Virginia, in a suburb where our neighbor had 17 cats. And they were free roaming. And so I had a constant flow of cats, or I mean, of cat injured birds. And I didn't realize at that point how hopeless it was, but I did manage to convince that woman to spay all her cats and neuter them and keep them inside.
Oh, great. My gosh.
As a little kid,
That's
I
quite a
put
task.
Humane Society literature in her mailbox.
Wow. Wow. Good for you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just couldn't take care of all those broken birds and orphans. But yeah, I started then, and then I got very into it in the early 80s when I lived in Connecticut, when I got my first actual rehab permit. And I've been doing it ever since. But I'm trying to stop now. It's really hard to stop once you start.
Wonderful. Yes, we had a speaker program back in October with a wildlife rehabber, Susie Gilbert. I think it's
Oh,
titled something like "Don't Answer the Phone" or something like that.
yeah.
Um,
Well, basically, people just stop answering their phone because they can't be everything to everyone. They're just one person. So yeah, you have to stop.
wow.
Mhm.
One comment in the chat from John Lowe's. Thank you. Your work is amazing. Have a good evening. I'm sure we all feel the same way. If
June's raising her hand.
oh,
Yes, I just wanted to say how much I loved reading Sin Jemima.
Oh,
Um,
thank
in addition to the beautiful illustrations, I just loved the whole narrative and the peek into your life and your children's life and your children's involvement.
you.
Um, and it was just a joy for me.
Thank you. That was the first book that I ever wrote that just followed one bird. And it was also a memoir. I mean, they all wind up being memoirs in a way. But I really enjoyed writing a book with a bird as a protagonist. That was just fun rather than a collection of essays. So I hope to do that again. I'm right now I'm writing about Carolina wrens for obvious reasons. So
Oh,
might get
that sounds great. I'll have to check out that book. Thank you for that comment, June.
sure.
Carrie Andrews writes in the chat, so extraordinary. I was enthralled throughout your talk.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, any further questions, comments? Bernie?
Um, are you training anyone to take over for when the day comes that you feel you really can't do it anymore? Like whether it be a family member, a close friend, an apprentice, someone that you know is really passionate about birds in general, conservationists, whoever, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I live a very isolated life. I'm 18 miles out into the country, so I don't really have anyone close, but I do have a friend who has learned a tremendous amount about bird rehab from me. He was a squirrel and rabbit guy, and I've made him into a squirrel, rabbit, bird, bat guy. So that feels like a victory, and he's finally getting his permit. So yeah, but I'm replaceable because I don't do much of this anymore. I do one brood of babies a year if I'm lucky. So I think of what I do as boutique rehabbing. It's not high volume. I'm not able to take all the birds people want me to take. So
Mhm.
I wind up giving a tremendous amount of advice over the phone and email and helping people in that way, but I just physically cannot take care of all the birds that come in. I'm the only rehabber who does songbirds in my county, and
Okay.
it's the most wildlife rich county in Ohio. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So but I'm not taking a big load. I just can't. I can't do
Good.
that in life.
And I think I remember reading in one of your books once, you raised hummingbirds once too, if I recall.
Yeah, and that was the talk I thought I was giving tonight. I got my wires crossed, and that's the Bluebird Effect talk. I have a whole I the Bluebird Effect is the book that got the Oprah Club pick, and that one I actually considered titling Hummingbirds and Other Birds I've Raised because the hummingbird chapter is so huge. It was such an incredible experience. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
it was cool. It was cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Bernie.
So I guess, so how did you get your training with the art part of it? You just acquired it, or the drawings are so amazing.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
I just taught myself to draw
mm,
representationally. I've never
self-taught.
been a cartoonist or anything like that, but I from a very early age, I tried to make things look as they actually looked. And I did have a year of drawing in college, which was a huge help. And I'm still in touch with my dear drawing professor, Will Ryman at Harvard, who is now in his 90s and still just kicking and critiquing art and doing art. He's amazing. So I felt very lucky to have that instruction in drawing. But as far as watercolor painting, I'm pretty much self-taught on that. I just basically, if I had to summarize how I learned, I looked at people whose work I loved, I studied their work, and I tried to figure out how they did it.
I love those Beverly Cleary books and Ramona the Pest and Bibsy and all of those.
The best illustrations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if we have no further comments, we're going to close out. I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you so much, Julie, for joining us for this wonderful program. It's been an honor, a pleasure to have you here. Thanks everyone for attending. Just a reminder for our upcoming walks on Sunday at Reed in the Marshlands and I think it was the 22nd Pelham Bay Park, and our April 16th program at the Eastchester Library on the Florida Everglades. And the recording of this program will be online within a couple of weeks. So please share, and check out our other programs on our website, brssaudubon.org. And have a wonderful rest of the evening, everyone. And take care.
Thank you, Julie. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Vern. And thanks,
Good night,
Leslie.
everyone.
Thank
Good night.
you. You're welcome. Thank you.